Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being on this worldwide program. I'm very, very excited to have four wonderful leaders from throughout the world. We have someone from India, Africa, Canada, and United States here locally in Southern California. And Jenna Van Draanen, who put this show together, she organized it and brought to us the attention of something very, very important. Basic income from a feminist perspective. What an outstanding, powerful concept it is to see how women view basic income, the need for basic income, how they're impacted, how women are impacted, and get a discussion going from the different perspectives of different parts of the world. So, Jenna, thank you for being on our program, and please tell us more about today's show.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us, Armando. So today joining us, we have Maria Wong from the collective of the Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter. The collective advocates for a guaranteed livable income, and Maria is here today to share that perspective with us. We also have Nkateko Chauke and she is the SADC Basic Income Grant Coordinator and the Basic Needs Basket Project Lead at the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute in South Africa. She's been advocating for human rights across the Southern African region for many years. And we're hoping also to get one more panelist on the show today, Renana Jhabvala. She has been with the Self-Employed Women's Association for over 35 years in India, and she's part of INBI, which is the Indian Basic Income Advocacy Group. So welcome, women, and we're very excited to be discussing feminist issues in the basic income movement with all of you today.
And we also have Maria Wong just joined us on the show as well.
Yes, Maria is here as well.
Could you give us the background on Maria, please?
Oh, I did give the background on Maria already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first.
I'm not listening. I've only had 4 cups of coffee. I'm sorry. I need one more.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Jenna. It's all yours.
So let's start off by discussing what the issues are in basic income that are relevant for women uniquely. I'm interested to hear your perspectives on that. So whoever wants to jump in and start off our discussion, please go ahead.
Hi, Jenna. Thank you for introducing us. I'll have a go at your first question. Firstly, just to go through the dimensions that exist on the African continent, and I'd like to speak more specifically about the Southern African region. What we see here in terms of the environment for women is the fact that the region is coupled or characterized rather by high levels of poverty and inequality. Employment opportunities continue to shrink. The unemployment rate for South Africa, for example, is 27.1%. And coupled with that is also the impact of food price inflation that has hit the region hard. Looking at also some of the effects that have spawned out by the droughts that we are facing. And what we see is that women continue to be the most affected or hardest hit by some of these socioeconomic realities that are sprawling out within the region. And many a times is that our regional countries as well are characterized by households that are mostly female-headed, with no husbands, or husbands rather have migrated to other countries to seek employment opportunities, placing a lot of burden on the woman to be the caregiver, to actually provide for the family in terms of school needs, basic needs as well for children and young girls as well. And most of the time, a lot of the burden is then shifted to also young girls who are in the household, who then have to leave school in order to take care of their siblings. So the nature of the economic environment of the region itself is causing women to continuously be trapped in a cycle of poverty. And therefore, what I see basic income as, I see it as a mechanism that would actually improve the livelihoods of women, a mechanism that would empower women to also be able to handle or respond to the economic shocks that affect them throughout. So my take on it is that basic income is something that is very crucial for women, and could be a potential driver for sustainable development, especially for the Southern African region.
Excellent. Thanks for that perspective. And Maria, how much of that rings true to where you are in Canada and the environment that you see on a day-to-day basis?
So I work in a 24-hour rape crisis line and transition house. So we work with women who experience male violence specifically. And so I see it from that kind of perspective. I see it from working with women in our safe house, trying to survive economically while leaving the only source of income usually that they stayed with was with the man. But we see two types of violence, which is domestic violence and prostitution, where the women who are economically insecure are being exploited completely and used and stuck in a cycle of violence and poverty. And so I think that issues surrounding childcare for single moms and the issue around how right now the income assistance or the welfare breakdown is by household, and it's not by individuals. I think those things will matter in the basic income movement, and why basic income is a better situation than the welfare that we have in Canada right now.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I think you both highlighted two really important aspects of why basic income is uniquely important for women. Nkateko spoke about the situation of poverty in the Southern African region and how that poverty is disproportionately experienced by women, or differentially experienced by women and female-headed households. And Maria talked about violence and what happens when women have to rely economically on men and are in unsafe situations.
Jenna, I invite you to share your points of view as well, being that you're a doctorate candidate at UCLA at the policy level. So, what is your view on this as well?
Well, one thing I hear a lot of, and I think is increasingly relevant, is how the labor market is changing, and how basic income might change the way we value domestic and caring labor that is typically done by women. And this relates to what both of our panelists have already said, but in a way, basic income might legitimize work that is already done by women and signify at a societal level that it's valuable, and that we treat that work as just as important as work that currently drives the economy. So I think that's another important aspect of how basic income might affect women in recognizing the labor that women often perform without getting paid for it. And I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
I also wanted to mention that Canada is a very wealthy country. Like, I don't want to minimize what happens in other places of the world. Like, it is a very wealthy country. It's just that the wealth is very sporadic. So there are some people that are much more wealthy, and for example, Indigenous communities and women are kind of not, are kind of ignored or invisible or made invisible in the economy here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
Why are women invisible in the economy? I mean, I'm posing the question to all of you.
If I could respond to that. So I'd say my take on the question, why are women invisible in the economy? Firstly, looking at our continent, Africa, and looking more specifically at our region, is the fact that our continent, or our setting, is predominantly from our colonial history, and from that, through our independence, we've had or experienced patriarchal structures. And so we see many a times that, and actually in most countries on the continent, that realization of education for young girls is diminishing as time goes, and therefore we have this constant mindset of just pulling down women without recognizing the fact that women could be potential leaders as well of the continent. And so those structural problems and marginalization of women and children is seen throughout our countries in Africa, and therefore poses a potential threat in terms of the threshold that women can actually get up to in terms of development, leadership, as well as building into the social fabric of societies. I mean, taking from examples from Tanzania, we had a site visit to the Bagamoyo district in Tanzania, and they currently are running a social protection cash transfer project called the Tanzania Action Social Fund, right? And from the conversations that I had with some of the women who are beneficiaries to this project, their conversation was the fact that every time the money is distributed to them, they have to make sure that their husbands are not around, the husbands are not at home, to see the woman receiving the income. And another thing is the fact that they'll have to hide this money, because once the husband gets hold of that money, he automatically feels entitled to control the revenue or the income that has been received. In most cases, which can be misused, spent on other unnecessary instruments. But what I'm trying to say is that it's sometimes the systems and societies that we find ourselves in that actually are that hinder women's development, women's leadership, or women's empowerment. So therefore, I mean, taking that back to you, Armando, is the fact that what could we say that women could do to drive up their recognition within societies as well? And one thing that I'd like to push forward is the fact that we need to employ or engage more with communities on civic education around human rights. We need to see basic income as a fundamental human right that is actually accessible to every single person. I think it's about the mindset as well. I mean, I'm listening also to Maria. I think you noted the fact that, I mean, from your perspective is that you're looking at basic income that would go to households instead of at the individual level. But at household level, from our context specifically, is the fact that we've got a patriarchal system. And if this basic income were to go to a household, I just want us to have a debate around this. If it goes to household level, what authority or what level of empowerment would a woman have to be able to make sure that this money is spent accordingly? For example, in South Africa, a third of poor households, actually poor households themselves, spend a third of their disposable income on food alone. So a question being then that would that mindset be the same for a man to say that I'd rather spend this third of our disposable income on food? Whereas many times that thinking level is drawn to the woman, because we are caregivers as women. We look after or sort after our children's needs. So therefore, there needs to be that balancing of power, and that can be done through more engagements, through civic education, and also allowing women to emancipate themselves through discussions such as these that we are having today.
Before Maria...
Jenna, if I may interrupt, we have our guest from India, but we have small technical problems. If we can turn off the computer at her end, because we're having a reverberation. So would you please introduce our guest from India, please?
Sure. Yes, so welcome, Renana. We're so pleased that you've joined us. We have Miss Renana Jhabvala on the line now, and she's been associated with the Self-Employed Women's Association for over 35 years in India, and as I understand, has also done a little bit of work with INBI, which is India's basic income group. So welcome to our call. We just discussed how basic income affects women specifically, and I think Maria might want to chime in on the household versus individual payment that we just got right into. Yeah.
Let's bring in Renana just to say hi, just to make sure she's connected, please.
Sure.
Yeah. Hello. Well, I'm glad to be on now, and look forward to participate in the conversation.
Okay.
Welcome.
All right, Jenna, back to you.
Sure. Maria, did you want to clarify what you meant, individuals versus households?
Yeah, I am very interested in having the income go to individuals for sure. What the problem in our social security net in Canada is that if we were to do any kind of taxation model or any kind of income support model, right now everything is based out of households in Canada. And if we were to change it to individuals, it would change the entire structure of how we do our taxes and how we count people in Canada or count residents in Canada. So it would be a huge structural change, but I think it's very worth it for sure, because I think every individual needs to be counted in order for women to be counted.
And more specifically, Maria, in our context, I'm fully aware that our contexts are different. How our countries are players in the international arena, in the international economy, that is I'm very cognizant of that. And with my point, Jenna, was really more directed to our current context within the Southern African region, and saying that there's a lot of stress at the household level. Households are either headed by women, or they are overpopulated. So it could be that a set amount for a household cannot be enough for all individuals in the household, but hence this is the reason why we have considered some of these factors as a static basic income grant campaign, to say that why not advocate for an individual on an individual basis, and of which that could help also free up the congested households as well. So if people have money to enable them to go seek employment proactively, then people are able to get to a point where they have employment, are able to move out of their household and establish their own houses. So it's some of those dynamics that from a regional perspective, we're trying to also encompass in our campaign.
Now, we're getting a perspective from North America and Africa, southern portion. Wow, let's get a perspective from India, most populated country in the world.
And what did you start with? Because I missed the first part. How would you like to
Well, maybe
start?
you could tell us, we were just talking about some of the issues in basic income that are particularly relevant to women. So that's where we started, and we've continued on. But maybe you can tell us from your perspective, you've seen huge changes in women's employment and empowerment, I think, as a result in India. So maybe tell us a little bit about what you think basic income would mean to women in India.
Okay. I actually, just one small correction.
Sure.
The basic income network in India is actually only 6 months old, and I'm one of the founders.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
So the INBI, which is the Indian Network for Basic Income. I actually want to tell you how we came to basic income, and therefore how I see what it means.
Mm.
Ours is a trade union. We have almost 2 million members, and we've been struggling for Social Security for our members for very, very, very many years. And in India, we have many, many schemes. And one of the ideas that emerged a few years ago was, why don't, we have like 300 schemes for every village. And so the idea that came was, why don't we just converge everything and make a basic income? At that time, it was called a cash transfer. So we weren't sure whether it was a good idea or not a good idea. So we worked with an organization called UNICEF. And we did a big study in which one of the BN people, Guy Standing, was involved. And at the end of the study, it was just a study of giving a basic income to households, to individuals in the villages. And at the end of that, and I think our study had something like 12,000 people, and including the control group. And at the end of it, we were really convinced that giving a small amount of money every month regularly, especially among the very poor, would be transformational. And then when we looked at women, now just to say a bit about this individual versus household, in India, what's developing is that if you give to the household, then it should go into the account of the woman. And we wanted to do that, but our researchers were very anti that, and they said, no, it should go to the men too. So anyway, we had individual accounts. And we found that for women, just from our study, we found that it made a big difference for women. Because anyway, women were earning much less than men. So when it was equally, everybody was getting equal, the women were getting more proportionately. Then we found very interesting things that you wouldn't even have thought of, which is that there were good effects on nutrition. So malnutrition came down, but it came down more among small girls like 2 to 5 than small boys. Then education went up among girls quite dramatically. And even more interesting, I think, to me, was that there was a big jump in earnings for women especially, because they came out of the labor market in the sense of being casual labor or agricultural labor, and they all had little farms, so they began investing in their little farms. So they sort of moved from being labor to farmer, and there was a big jump there. And the other thing that was very important for us was that in India, women don't go, especially in the villages, they don't go into public spaces that much. So, but when we did the cash transfer, they had to go into the public spaces to things and discuss, and also, to go to the banks. So it made a big difference in the way the village was organized, because women began coming out much more.
Wow.
So I think that's what we saw.
Very interesting.
Jenna, what question do you come out of all this? Wow, what's different points of view? Awesome.
Yes, and I think we've been hearing lots of different ways that basic income impacts women in terms of violence and freedom, and also poverty alleviation and changing household structures, and it sounds like health and investing in the future as well. So I'm curious, with all of these positive outcomes, why don't we see basic income being talked about in women's rights movements? Why hasn't that been front and center, or what do we need to do to bring it more into the light from each of your perspectives?
Who do you want to start with?
We're just doing kind of popcorn style, so whoever has a thought can share it, and and we'll go from there.
Let me just take that one and then pass it on. Actually, in India, the basic income discussion is very, very, very new. And there was a huge backlash to not to basic income, but to cash transfers from the left in India, because they said that the government would then, if they did basic income, government would withdraw its responsibility. So it's only very recently that basic income has become a little bit respectable.
Mm-hmm.
From my side, Jenna, is the fact that there's very little ownership of the concept or notion of basic income from our women's movements. And I'd say predominantly because there hasn't been a feminist position around it. And quite frankly, it's what our region needs, it's what our continent needs. And we've seen a level of ownership stemming out of trade and labor unions. But like I said in the beginning, that we need that ownership to stem from the individual. And I can say, I mean, really, when talking to people, what I like to emphasize is the fact that I would like to talk about what basic income means for me as a woman, not me as Nkateko, but as a woman in Africa, in Southern Africa as well. And these are some of the discussions that we need to have with individuals, with communities, to enable them to see. I mean, there was a basic income pilot in Namibia. Jenna, I'm sure you're aware of this, but it happened in 2008. And some of the results from this was the fact that women and children were able to access very much needed healthcare services. The school attendance rate went up by a long shot. School uniforms for children. I mean, if I'm a child and I've got school uniform, then I'll definitely go to school because I'm looking good. If I have eaten in the morning, I'll go to school. And again, it brings us back to the question, who is the person who makes all of this possible? Who makes sure that a child is eaten before they go to school, let alone woken up to go to school? It's the woman, it's the caregiver. And it's the rhetoric that we need to also transform into our communities, into our societies, to ensure that people recognize the fact that women play an integral part to the social fabric of any community or society. So it's about how we speak about basic income that will necessitate this recognition and the fact that women have an important role to play, especially considering emancipation, considering shifting the power dynamic to the woman who oversees the running of the household. I mean, generally for us as Africans, I believe it's a myth that a man is the head of the household, because even when they sit on the consultative tribunals in the tribes, in the rural settings or rural areas that still have these systems, men actually deliberate on issues that affect communities, and their consensus at the end of that meeting would be to say, we will go home and sleep on it and revert to our meeting tomorrow. And the irony in this is that every man goes home to sleep on it to actually consult his wife on what decision to take, coming back to the meeting, giving that decision. So it's about us making more and more groups of women recognize that they have a very strong role to play in society. They have leadership roles to actually take over as well. So I believe it's the rhetoric, it's how we speak about basic income that enables women to also catch on to this and enables that vibrancy in women movements, allowing them to take that ownership as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think what you're saying is so important. It hasn't been very commonly discussed, and we need to connect those dots so that women can take this on and advocate for something that could be so transformational for all of us as women, as people in society that want to see our future generations healthy and well cared for. Maria, do you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I think the feminist movement has worked hand in hand with the anti-poverty movement for many years over here. So I do think there is some spark about women's poverty, and women in the feminist movement know that. I think it's just about how to best go about that. That gets a little bit shaky, because I know that feminists are hesitant sometimes of some reforms, and especially since when feminists want certain things, like having sexual assault in the criminal justice system, it doesn't actually show in real life that the sexual assault criminal justice system is actually being used properly. So I think there is a lot of want for change, especially for women's poverty and women's economics in the feminist movement. There always has been. Women were always, they invented the transition house. They always wanted to be in single mothers programs. They always wanted some economic change, but and they do, like, some do know about basic income, and the more I talk with other feminists here, the more willing and open they are to it, because they naturally want to do something else that will equal our economic rights. So that's what I think. And in my experience, feminists have been in this discussion quite a long time. That's how I learned about it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
We're approaching close to the closure of the show. You know, it was just getting started with this, but Jenna, we're going toward the end. Do you have any concluding questions you have, and then have the panelists share?
Sure. So one of the questions I really wanted to touch on was how basic income affects issues that are at the intersection of race and gender and class. And so not just a women's issue, but that perhaps basic income might be more impactful for some women than others. What do you think about that, and how do you think this might affect many different types of women in each of your experiences?
Well, in South Africa, firstly, I'd like to say that South Africa is one of the countries with the highest inequality levels in the whole world. And so we see this inequality spanning out at different levels. I mean, in the workplace, social places, and most of the time is the fact that the Black African woman, again, I'm speaking to our context, is mostly marginalized from any process. And our approach to this as a static basic income grant campaign is the fact that we need to have universal approaches to basic income. And by this, I'm saying it's just like speaking about gender now. You cannot speak about gender only focusing on women and not men anymore. It's just not allowed anymore. It's not how the international community views things. We are working on a very human rights driven framework. Whether we're looking at economics, politics, social issues, but there is a strong wave of a human rights approach. And I believe this element of universalism of a basic income grant really addresses some of these structural inequalities that exist, and also will be able to bridge that gap between the marginalized, who in often cases in Africa are the have-nots, most of which are women. So I believe universalizing a basic income grant, for instance, allows us to give power to those who don't have, and to afford them an equal opportunity to participate economically. So, and I believe from our context, allowing women to self-uplift is one element that brings the message home for us. If we give women an opportunity or provide them with opportunities that will enable them to graduate from their poverty status, as well as uplift them and enable them to start their own entrepreneurial businesses, promote local economic development as well, then it brings us together and allows us to see ourselves equally. Hence, my take on this is that we need to see basic income as fundamental human right, as I've said before. It shouldn't be separated from the needs of any society, and it shouldn't be separated from the needs of women more specifically. So I believe that having a very universal and harmonized approach to policy framework that deal or look at social protection and economic development, we need to factor in the role that women play, which is a very important one.
Thank you.
And so
I'm sorry. Go ahead, because we need to also cut that, we need to get into the time frame of the show. So I'm sorry.
3 words: human rights approach.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Jenna?
Sure. Renana, what are your thoughts about how basic income affects class and race and gender altogether?
Well, I'll just refer again to the kind of studies, we've actually done 3 studies. And what we find, what happens is that women, so if you look at the economic base of the pyramid, you find that poor women of low caste, so class, caste, and gender are sort of right at the bottom of the pyramid. The women who are lower caste and poor. And what the basic income does is that since proportionately it's a much larger part of their income. And also, those women are cash starved. So they don't earn much anyway. What they earn often is unpaid. So, or it's in the form of food or something else. And so getting cash in their hands is really, really liberating, really emancipatory. So I think, you can't just talk about women overall. I think it's important to talk about women right at the base, which is both caste and class. One more small thing I wanted to tell you that we saw, which was very amazing to me. In India, the higher caste women are very secluded. And they, at first, the family said, we don't want your basic income. And then the women came to us and said, well, we want your basic income. We want an account. And they said, we're rich. We can get as much as we like to eat and wear and jewelry, but we have no freedom. And this gives us a little freedom. So.
Interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jenna?
And Maria, what about you? Do you have any last thoughts on this question?
I do think that a UBI would affect different women of different classes differently, for sure. Like, I think women in poverty and working class women will benefit more from it. But in the intersection, like gender and race, there are still outside forces of sexism and racial inequality. But I think with us not having to struggle in poverty, that will undermine some of our ability to be able to create a more egalitarian society. And I think people are willing to do that kind of work that is humanitarian and politically changing, so that we can live in a society that is way better and more equal.
Okay, I know that Jenna, we're going to let Jenna do the closure statement here, sort of an overview, but I want to give each of the members who are already spoken right now 15 seconds. Please give us a contact information where persons can learn more about you and your work. So, okay, Maria, you want to go first? In 15 seconds each, give out your contact information, please.
Sure. We have a website. It's www.rapereliefshelter, all one word, .bc.ca if you want to see anything of our collective's work. We have a 24-hour hotline, so you can always call it at 604-872-8212 if you know anyone in Vancouver that needs help for escaping male violence.
Thank you very much. Who's next?
I'll take it. Yeah. Anyone who wants to catch up on some of our work and also engage and endorse the campaign, all information is available on our website, which is available at www.spii.org.za. We're also happy to communicate with you via our Twitter handle, which is at SADCBIGC campaign, and also feel free to contact us on our landline 011-833-0161, which is a South African line. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Renana?
The website where we refer the most, we have lots of websites, but this is www.sevabharat, and I'll spell it. It's SEWABHARAT.org, and that's also the Facebook Seva Bharat. So I think you can exercise that.
Wonderful. Well, we're not going to put any pressure on Jenna. So we're just going to throw the whole book at her. Jenna, you get to close the show and give us your perspective and your take on this wonderful presentation over the last few minutes. And also if you have any contact information. And you're a PhD candidate.
Thank you.
Let's get it done. It's a lot of work, but closure.
Sure. Well, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak with these fantastic leaders all over the world. Thank you, women, for sharing your perspectives with us. And I think we are now tasked with going out and making this happen, talking about basic income from a universal human rights perspective and bringing the conversations of basic income and the feminist movement together. And also we were talking at the beginning about how basic income we don't always talk about women's issues when we have webcasts like these. So I think we've started today to change that conversation a little bit, and I think we shall keep doing so. And I welcome all of your viewers to keep interacting with us and to join us online and continue these discussions. All of us are connected in some way to the Basic Income Earth Network, which is an international organization that advocates for universal basic income, and over 30 different countries are affiliates in it. And if you want more information about that organization and you want to reach us, you can find us at www.basicincome.org. And we look forward to continuing these conversations in the future. Thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everyone who'll be on the show. Again, we have Canada represented, Africa, we have India, and we have UCLA here in California. So, ladies and gentlemen, yes, I totally agree with all four ladies. This has to be covered more times. The issue is too critical to let go. And somewhere I read that the feminist movement is a very positive movement, that if we do recognize their rights and work with women the way we should have from beginning, but offset what we have in the past and look into the future, we're going to make this a much, much better world. And I think that's what's been the missing link here, to make our lives all better for all 9 billion of us here on the planet. So ladies, thank you very much. And 1 second for each one of you.
I'll say that basic income is not only feasible, but it's necessary. Thank you all for having us tonight.
Renana?
Basic income is a new topic in India, and I'm glad that the women are leading it, and I hope we stay in the lead.
Maria?
I think basic income is definitely a women's issue, and I'm glad to share this with other panelists around the world.
Wonderful. Jenna?
Thank you, everyone, for being part of this discussion, and please continue to keep pushing the conversation about basic income into areas where it's not, and please keep encouraging the women leaders within your movement to speak up and to be part of the conversation.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Armando F. Sanchez, and I thank my co-host, Jenna, who put this together. And Jenna's leadership is what called the attention to this vital issue. You can contact me at lsacnational@hotmail.com. I'm Armando F. Sanchez. This is my production. And also, if you need information on any of these wonderful leaders, please contact me as well, and I'll refer whatever information over to them as well. And I hope this is not the last time we meet again, and we'll continue the discussion again. Thank you very much for everyone for being on our program. This show will go worldwide, and please, whatever suggestions, ideas you have, we can make this movement even more impact, let us know. We're all here to listen to you. Thank you, and good evening. Goodbye to everyone.
Bye.